Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study. Today we're beginning a new study, a study in the book of Daniel. Now, Daniel, of course, is an Old Testament book. It is one of the books of the prophets. When we look at Daniel, we find it has 12 chapters, and we find that the center of the story revolves around this man, Daniel. Some interesting events in his life and how he was faithful in the midst of difficult times, but also he experienced some extraordinary visions. Daniel was a prophet, and God gave him some extraordinary visions of what he was going to do. And so in the 12 chapters of Daniel, we see these wonderful stories of how Daniel was faithful to the will of God, and how Daniel was able to interpret the visions that came to him, and that gave him some scope of what God was planning on doing in the days to come. Now, one of the interesting things about Daniel is that he spent most of his life not in Judah, not in Jerusalem, but he spent most of his life in Babylon, in the heartland of the enemy. Notice how the book begins. Chapter 1, the first couple of verses. It was in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, when Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. Now this gives us a date. The 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim was the year 605 BC. This was the beginning of what will become known as the exile of Judah, when Babylon will overwhelm the land and carry the people into exile. Now, Babylon's destruction of Judea occurred in 3 stages. The first is in 605 BC. That's what's referred to here. The next will be in 597 BC, which is another invasion. And then the final will be in 587 BC, when Jerusalem is utterly destroyed and the people are carried into exile. When we talk about the Babylonian exile, it's normally dated as beginning in 587 BC. But the Babylonian domination began in 605 BC, referenced in Daniel 1:1. At that point, Babylon essentially overwhelmed Judah, and Judah became a vassal state, a servant state of the empire of Babylon. A lot of their treasures were taken away, and a lot of the people, the young people, were carried off to Babylon to serve the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. Now we know that Daniel, we're going to see as we read on, Daniel is one of those captives who is taken to the land of Babylon. He is a young man, probably just a teenager at this time. But he's going to spend the rest of his life in Babylon. Now this occurs in 605 BC. When you run up to chapter 10, another date is given in a vision Daniel receives in that chapter. And in chapter 10, verse 1, it says, "In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a revelation was given to Daniel." Now this occurs with Cyrus the Persian, who is the empire that follows Babylon. But notice it's the 3rd year of Cyrus. That's the year 537 BC. So that's the scope of years that Daniel covers. It begins in 605 BC, and the last date given is 537 BC. So nearly 70 years are covered. So Daniel, as a young man, is taken to Babylon, where he lives the rest of his life, and eventually he'll die there as an old man. And over that nearly 7 decades in which he lived in Babylon, first under the Babylonian Empire, and then next under the Persian Empire, and all that time he remains faithful to God. He's never able to return to his homeland, but he remains faithful to the God of Israel, the true God. And he's never seduced, turned away by the idolatry of Babylon or of Persia. That's going to be one of the prime elements of the book, the faithfulness of Daniel to his God, even when he is in a foreign land. So as we move through Daniel in this study for the next several weeks, we're going to see what a remarkable man he was, all the way from his youth to his old age. He always remains faithful to God, and he sees time and time again that God is able to deliver his servants. And I believe it's because of Daniel's faithfulness that God reveals these visions to him, gives him these visionary experiences about what God is planning on doing in the world in the days to come. So as we move through Daniel, we're going to see how this man Daniel is such an example to us of being faithful to God, even in difficult times. And also we're going to see through Daniel's visions some of God's plans for his world. So I hope you join us each day for our 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel.